Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey. I am joined today on this new year of 2026 with Jessica Rabbit-Rabbit Guillermo Lomas. Happy New Year, Jess.
Happy New Year. I was waiting for you to think about the year because I still haven't got into the habit of 2026. If I'm honest, I'm still in 2024. So kudos to you for getting the new year spot on from the top of the show, coming in hot.
It's like what we used to do back in the days when people wrote checks. I don't think anybody writes a physical check anymore to anyone. But you practice over and over again writing that new year to ensure that when you put the date on the check, that you write the actual new year on the check. So you're not wasting a check, right? So I just practiced it over and over again before we recorded 2026, 2026, 2026. And I got it.
That's a good pro tip for all the listeners out here who still have to practice their checkbooks. I don't know when I last saw a physical check.
Right?
I definitely don't have a check on any of my accounts.
No, I don't think so.
Actually, now you're saying that, I don't know if I've ever owned a checkbook. I must have done it sometime.
No, of course you had to have. Right?
I don't know, Maybe on my student account it came with a checkbook, but I don't think once I graduated.
Huh.
I don't think my current... But I also know that you guys in the US hung on to the mighty check a lot harder than we did here.
We did.
I remember the first time I went to the US and they were telling me about these new things called PIN numbers. And everybody in the US was trying to convince me that was a dangerous way of transacting money, putting a number into a thing. And I was like, but I've been, technically able to sign for you on your checks in anywhere.
I know. The signature is stupid.
The signature is so silly.
Yeah.
And a PIN is like...
Yeah.
A closed number of people that you share your PIN with, I guess.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, who are you sharing your PIN with, Jess?
Well, that's kind of awkward because it's obviously not you. Maybe I have access to other people's PINs. Just
we have about 30,000 people listening, so go ahead. Do you have anything you want to share with us, Jess?
Yeah, you can send your PIN numbers to... Actually, I'm not interested in your PIN. I just want the long number off the front of the card and then the short number off the back of the card and your postcode /zip code.
Yeah. Do you need the expiry date?
Yeah, sure. That'd be really helpful if you could get me that too. And I'll take care of the rest. What a way to start 2026. Just financial fraudulent activities on wax. This is what happens when Jason's not here to keep us on the straight and narrow.
Exactly.
You and I go on some sort of like card spending spree.
Oh my gosh, this is great. Let's just fraud 101 2026. Here we come.
I can't wait to be on the episode of... I'm obsessed with... there's a channel here on YouTube to the YouTubers, and if not, it's on YouTube to the listeners, which is about... They're called Social Catfish. And I cannot wait for us to feature on an episode of Social Catfish where it's like, I gave the nice lady on the podcast my card details. She said she'd send me things. I invested in Bitcoin for her. I find it fascinating that people just willingly give all their money away on these clearly fake scams, you know.
Yeah.
This guy texted me by chance. And from that, we had a lovely romantic interest blossomed from there on in. It's incredible. I'm completely addicted to them, even though the plot line for them all is the same, which is don't tell people you don't know your personal details. Do not send photographs of your social security number to people you've never met face to face who claim to work on an oil rig. That's like a big scam. They have these people that say they're an oil rig.
Why an oil rig?
Yeah, that's one of the like key. There's always like key characters that kind of draw these people in. It's people who are on an oil rig and can't get off. Loads of them are military scams. They're like, oh, we need $11,000 to be able to fly home. Like, if you have a spare half hour and you want to really fall down a rabbit hole fast, Social Catfish is where it's at.
Wow, this is great. I'm going to learn some tips and tricks. 2026.
This is not meant to be a confidence, boost as to how to get details out of people. I must stress, for the record, I'm not encouraging any of our listeners or viewers of podcasts to go out and commit financial crimes.
I thought this was a how-to guide. I thought we were starting a whole new podcast.
Don't we put that behind the paywall. That's not...
It's our Patreon.
Yeah, we don't give that away for free.
Oh, my God. Oh, what a way to start a new year. Did you have a good celebration?
I did. It was nice. I was back home with my mum, and then we had a very tame New Year's here back in Scotland, and we had some not tame sessions in the pub a couple of days later. Yeah, I kind of, it's been a bit of a whirlwind. Now here we are at the business end of 2026.
Yeah.
You and I have already got our diaries out planning travel. Where to go. There's a rumour that you two are going to appear in Scotland. Don't want to confirm nor deny that yet. Although we've definitely talked about it on other podcasts.
Indeed.
So that's, you have to have listened to other episodes to get that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Drank some things. Did you have a nice time?
I did, yeah. Haida and I went to a brewery on New Year's Eve. Local brewery, who I at one time thought was shit. Because they were. I'm not going to say who they were. But now they're brewing. Maybe they have a new brewmaster. I hope they're not listening. But now they're brewing fantastic beers. Absolutely fantastic beers. And there was a comedy show. And so we're drinking beers, watching a comedy show. And we got home safe and sound. Good. And hung out with our daughters and watched the ball drop. And then hung out a little more, listening to music, and then we went to sleep. And that was it. Just sort of quiet.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah. And I had a little Ardnamurchan after the ball dropped. I wanted to have whiskey from my favorite distillery to just ease me into 2026.
Our fact-finding listeners have written that down for later when we inevitably wind you up about your top distilleries. They'll be like, the episode at the top of 26 you specifically said. Okay, write that down, people. Write it down. That sounds all very civilized and very nice.
Yeah, it's nice. That's what 50-plus-year-old people do, Jess.
Well, that's not far off what we did, so that's either concerning or just already setting the tone early. I've spent a lot of the festive period watching ice hockey, so go sports.
Sports ball, sports puck.
Sports puck, I think is the phrase they use.
Yeah, sports
with
puck.
their sports sticks.
Yeah, they call that mother pucker.
Oh no.
Okay, we can
quick
we
before
can
we
go.
end up in sports puns. This podcast has taken a really sharp turn from what we set out to do.
It really has. Listen, you had the pleasure of meeting in person with Justine Hazlehurst, an author. And I'd love for you, before we hand it over to your conversation with her, I'd love for you to just give us a prep. You know, what are we and the listeners about to hear?
Sure. Well, Justine is a woman who has many strings to her bow, so it's kind of funny for you to introduce her first and foremost as an author. Not that she's not. She very definitely, as you're about to hear, is. But I was trying to think, how did I first meet Justine? She and I have, obviously, I think, have met at a whiskey thing somewhere in the sands of time. And she's very funny. I very much enjoy her company. And we also judged together in the World Whiskey Awards. So it will have been a whiskey-based thing.
Yeah.
But she had started during lockdown researching the book that we're going to discuss in a minute. And so it's kind of taken off from there. I'll let Justine explain that in the interview, how she got into this, but she has many, as I said, strings to her bow. She also organises whiskey festivals. She runs Borderlands and Fife Whiskey Festival. But she also is pretty well known for the whiskey walking tours she does in Leith, where she used to live.
A whiskey walking tour. I think that's so cool.
Oh, it's so good. I did it. I took a bunch of friends and we commissioned Justine to entertain us for a morning. And it was great. She's got incredible knowledge, as you're going to hear. And she really knows her subject. But she presents it in a way that I think is really fun. And I really... I admire people who can take complicated subjects and make them very palatable. So you and I were just chatting before we hit record that in theory, researching into the histories and going through all the archives could potentially come across as, you know, a bit of a stiff and dusty, like maybe a dissertation or some sort of thesis being submitted, something very academic. But what I love about this book is the way she's made this very approachable. So I strongly implore everybody to hit up Justine's website or check out where you can grab this book from, because even if you think it's maybe not quite your usual pace, it's well worth the gamble, and there's a lot of lessons, as she and I discuss, which the industry is still learning from the old Pattison crash at the end of the 1800s. So there's a lot to be learned there, and she's just written it in a way that I didn't want to totally brown nose her in the interview because that's embarrassing. But she's written it in a way that I think is very appealing to everybody. It's written in a way that's very consumable. Our very own, not present in the podcast recording, Mr. Johnston Yellen said he read it over Christmas. So he's a quick reader. So do we have a reading speed? If Jason's consumed it over Christmas, I think everyone else could do it in a couple of days too.
Yeah, I think so. Just I think that's 5 times speed is what you do it at.
We're nearly at Matthew of the Good Spirits fame and his 27 times speed podcast. I still can't. Sorry, Matthew, I can't. It's too difficult. So yes, I had a great time talking to Justine. She's a lovely friend. I'm just going to wildly make her my friend, even if she's not keen. We're friends now. We're friends.
Of course.
It was really nice to chat to her about a book that I was very excited to see her put together. And I can't wait to see what other mad topics she gets up to, because I know she's not done. She is researching other things. She's got she's got the scent for it. I don't want to say she's like a bloodhound. That's mean. But there's other similes you can use here too, isn't there? Metaphors about a bit between the teeth.
She likes to sniff things out.
Yeah. Oh God, no!
Quick,
cancel this.
I've made that.
We've made this much worse.
Yeah.
Quick, roll the tape. Roll the tape. Hello, dear Podcast listeners. Today I am sat in Edinburgh, in person, because we are trying to do in-person chit-chats. And today I have managed to rustle a good friend of mine into the office for us to have this discussion. So today I would like to welcome to the podcast Justine. Hello, Justine.
Hello.
And we're going to discuss many things. But the reason that I wanted you to come on the podcast was to talk to you about your fantastic book, which is currently sat in front of me.
Cool.
And to find out a little bit more about you and the many interesting whiskey-related activities. That sounds really nefarious.
I was going to say, yeah,
whiskey activities. So let's start with the book, because that seems like a good place to start. So
good.
Maybe you could start by introducing yourself a little bit and how we got to this book that is in front of me.
Okay, so, well, for about 20 years of my life, I was a secondary school teacher. So I used to teach French in Fife, so I reckon I must have done something very bad in a previous life. Tried teaching French to Fifers, it's not easy. And then in 2016, I left teaching to start out working, set up my own business, doing various different activities in the whiskey industry, because that was something I really wanted to get involved with. And I started off doing tours and tastings, and then in 2013 I'd moved to Leith. Right? I'd bought a place in Leith, and that was just on the cusp of it turning into this very sort of hipster, trendy place.
Are you saying you started the trend? The gentrification of Leith starts with you?
I'd like to think so, but no, I just bought when prices were cheap. Thank God. It was the only place I could afford to buy a place in Edinburgh where I could actually afford to buy a flat. So I moved to Leith, and directly opposite the flat that I bought was an old derelict bonded warehouse, and I was always intrigued by it, and I always used to say, I'd like pals come over for whiskey nights, and we'd go, oh, I wonder if there are any casks left in there and stuff, just trying to find out more about this old bond, and started to do some research and found out that there were somewhere like 90 to 100 different bonded warehouses in Leith, but I didn't find any information about this fucking one, right? Nothing at all. I couldn't find out anything about the one directly opposite my flat, but realised that Leith had this immense Scotch whisky history. And then in 2017, so I have Kate Watt in Campbelltown to thank for this, I guess. I went to the Campbelltown Malts Festival and did one of Kate's fabulous walking liquid history tours. I don't know if you've done that. And it's a walking tour around Campbelltown, stopping off at all of the lost distilleries, you know, that were once there. And I thought, I wonder if something like this would work in Leith, rather than it having a distilling history, this huge history for sort of blending and bonding and brokering. And the Leith Festival were looking for people to put on events. So at the time, Leith Festival was almost like the poor cousin of the Edinburgh Fringe, you know. It's like, so they were looking for people to put on events. So I put it to them, do you think a Leith Whisky Trail would work? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. So that's when it started, 2017. I'll never forget the very first tour. It was only 12 people on the Saturday. It was like booked out, and I had a whole range of different people with different sort of varied knowledge of whiskey. And I remember one of the questions I was asked was, what is barley? And I thought, okay, I might pitch this to the whole crowd here.
Yeah, that's a fairly basic question. I would have thought as an entry into a whiskey tour.
It is. And bearing in mind this was like super geeky, so the walking tour was taking in the history of Scotch whisky making, well, blending and bonding in Leith, and so immense detail of Scotch whisky history. And then there was a tasting afterwards, where there'd be like 4 or 5 different whiskies from maybe like the 60s or 70s, 80s, all linked to the route that we'd taken on the walking tour. So it was a real geeks tour, geeks tour. And then the next day, I was expecting more of the same, so I'd kind of like amended what I was going to say and talk about, you know, as you hear in distilleries, things like there are 3 ingredients that we used to make Scotch whisky, but there were folk who I think there were about 4 folk who were doing the masters at Heriot Watt in brewing and distilling.
Okay, so you would hope they knew what barley was.
And 2 people who were building a distillery. So that was the first weekend of tours. And so after that, I just kept plugging away with the Leith Whisky Trail, and it's proving quite popular. People had this sort of love, this intrigue of like old whiskey from, as I say, I've had bottles from the 50s, but 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, mostly. And with the blends, they're slightly more affordable than, say, single malts from the 70s and 80s. So people like really intrigued by this, and it did prove to be quite popular. And then, of course, we had COVID, so the pandemic meant no tours, no tastings, and after probably about 3 weeks of non-stop Zoom tastings, I thought, really, this isn't going to end anytime soon, so maybe I should do something a little bit more productive with my time than just, you know, drinking on Zoom tastings.
I just doubled down. I started doing more tastings. I was like, hey, you, leaning out the window, shouting at people in the street, have you heard of whiskey? Do you want to try it? I'll meet you on Zoom.
It was just like, well, what am I going to do? So I thought, well, you know, I can't do the tours, can't do the tastings. So I did what any normal person would do and just traced the entire Pattison family tree.
God, that's not very normal. We've all done it. I'm sure every listener to this podcast is like, we've also written a book, let us tell you.
Just because, like, obviously, looking into the history of Scotch whisky and Leith, you can't read anything without coming across the Pattisons. And so I was always really quite intrigued. So I just started reading more about them, and I think what came to light pretty early on was that somebody had written something once and nobody had actually checked whether the veracity of the original sort of quote or the original, and it had just been repeated over and over and over again, to the point where then everyone just accepted that as being, the truth. So that became quite clear from the beginning, but I was really interested in them as people. So I traced the entire family tree and managed to find a living relative. He's Walter Pattison's great-grandson. And his name was on a death certificate. So I just wrote a letter, like snail mail, sent the letter off, basically saying, I'm researching this family called the Pattisons. One of them was your great-grandfather. I don't suppose you have any information about them whatsoever, or you know anything. And if you do, can you send me an email? And sure enough, David sent me an email, and he was like, I've got all of your old photo albums.
I think that's amazing. You know, if somebody wrote to you and said, hi, I think a relative of yours relatives of yours are very heavily involved in the demise of an industry. Would you like to have a chat about it? If so, contact me here. To then write back and be like, oh, it's all in the loft, actually. I've got do you want a bunch of pictures? Do you want... we can get to the various artefacts that I know you've got your hands on. Like, I just find that wild.
He was so generous with his time. So, you know, the rules for lockdown changed. We'd arranged to, you know, meet up. I was going to head down, and he'd got all the photos ready and all the Walter's belongings that he still had ready, and for me to take a look at. Then the rules changed, so you couldn't meet up, and then the rules changed back again, and we made another, and then they changed it. Everyone was to-ing and fro-ing, so it probably took about maybe a year, I think, maybe, from when he first emailed me back to eventually being able to head down there and take a look. And yeah, sure, he'd got these ancient photo albums. So this was the first time that I'd seen actual photographs of Walter Pattison, and when the previous pictures I'd seen of the brothers were just sketches in newspapers, usually sketches of them in the dock, you know.
Yeah.
And they just look nothing like that. So I just thought...
Nice form of anonymity, to be like, yeah, I look like the guy in the paper, it's not me.
I mean, it was dreadful sketching. Just heading to David's, and I mean, I just spent the whole day there looking at all of the photo albums of Walter. He had Walter's old wallet, which was absolutely phenomenal. The fact that you know this was Walter's wallet. This is what he used to walk around Edinburgh and Leith with.
He was not being the world's most honest man in Leith. Yeah. Not that he would have been the only person being dishonest in Leith.
Absolutely not. No. I think what was noticeable was there were no photographs of Robert in any of the photo albums whatsoever. So this was, that was they were sort of conspicuous in their absence, I guess.
Do you think that's a deliberate thing? He's been sort of edited, a bit like the Brontes did, where they edited out the brother in the paintings.
Possibly,
it's a bit like that. He was deliberately left out.
Yeah, I mean, there were other members of the family. Some of them I wouldn't be able to, identify with absolute certainty, because there were some of the photographs had inscriptions on the back. Somebody had written a message to somebody, and it was like from so and so, so you knew who it was from, who it was to, etc. But some of them I thought, okay, that's the other brother, but I couldn't say 100% with certainty, so I never included those photos in the book. But there was absolutely, definitely not a photo of Robert in the entire thing. Yeah, so,
it's interesting because this is a kind of the era that we're talking about. Is kind of photographs aren't quite mainstream, so it's interesting that there's even as many pictures for you to look at as they were.
Absolutely.
Does that come with part of the two brothers, Robert and Walter? Is that kind of part of their wealth and standing, that there are these pictures sort of around to be swapped and kept as an eventual archive?
I mean, I'm not an expert on sort of Victorian sort of photography and the day, but it was a lot of the photos. Obviously, they were taking place in photographer studios, and you've got the name of the photographer and these prints, etc. But there was a whole bunch of photos that were taken in Morocco. So one of the key aspects of Walter's defence is that when Robert was balancing, I'm going to put that in inverted commas, coming up with a balance sheet for the profit and loss account, stuff like that. It's all in the book. I don't want to spoil too much. Walter's, one of the main key points of his defence is that he wasn't there. He wasn't in the country. He was out. So we only had his word for it, And obviously looking back at various sort of passenger lists, I couldn't find any record of him leaving the UK or coming back to the UK around those times. But this entire album of photographs in Morocco, so one of his key points of his defence was he was in Morocco at this time. And so these photographs are dated on the back with the inscriptions. And when you think about, it's not like today where you just whip your phone out and go, you would have had to have I mean, there were literally pictures of him and his wife and camels and things. And so, getting that camel to stand still so that they could take the photo, because, it was a longer process getting the camera set up and everything,
And arranging some camels.
Exactly. But there were photos of him in Morocco, an entire sort of half. It's a huge album, so it's about half the album. So things like that were super interesting for me, because I was like, oh yeah, so he was telling the truth, and there's the evidence, and that's the key with the book. I think a lot of people have perhaps been a little confused at times because it reads as a story, but it is a piece of narrative non-fiction. Everything in that book I can back up with a source of some kind, whether it's a family document or family photos, whether it's a newspaper article or trial transcripts or bankruptcy document or whatever it is. Even the weather. I remember Jenny Carlson from Ardnamurchem was like, how did you know what the weather was like? I said, because I looked in the newspapers. I looked at the forecast before, on the day, and the day after.
I just think I'm letting us definitely run into this too quickly, because I have lots of questions about stuff like the absolute brilliance and the super sleuthing that I think you have gone above and beyond.
So Karen, my business partner, calls me Inspector Clouseau. So
absolutely, yeah. I don't think there's anybody else. Before we get into maybe the brothers and exactly what you've gone into in the book, you've kind of already got to one bit that I wanted to talk about, which is the way you've presented this, because I think on the face of it, the prospect of reading into, the affairs of these two brothers are incredible, and the way it all interconnects with, I think it's worth pointing out, it wasn't just the Pattisons who were misbehaving at this time. There's a good bunch of people that you have also gone into in the book who are doing the same thing.
The Pattisons got caught, basically.
So maybe they were the ones doing it the least well, because they were the ones who were caught out doing it. But the kind of how quickly they've cottoned onto it. But the prospect of reading it, especially, I guess, court reports, and there's nothing... In the case of looking into this and of them being prosecuted, it's not salacious, there's no affairs, and it's not, a kind of soap opera scandal. It's a business scandal, which is very serious and long-reaching. You've done a fantastic job of presenting it in this book as not a set of dry court reports and then you kind of summarising them. I love that it reads... You said it's not a story, but to people who are listening to this who maybe haven't had a chance to read it yet, it reads a bit like that. You're kind of following along the developments. I absolutely love the way you've kind of like chronologically got it as almost like a diary entry, sort of,
Yeah, there are lots of reasons. So, I look at the whiskey books that are on the shelf, and there's some amazing whiskey books on the shelf, but pretty much all of them are reference style books.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want it to be another kind of reference style book, because I'm reluctant to use the word story, because when people say story, they think it's a work of fiction.
Yeah.
But, and I've said this on my social media, you couldn't actually make this shit up.
No, you're absolutely right. It definitely, I think if you sat down to write it, people had been saying, wow, Justine's got like this really involved brain. She's really like embellished. She's really gone to town with all this backwards and forwards of transactions of going between different banks and like running to different locations. Like that's it's very well thought out of you. Well done.
So it is a story as such. And I always thought it's the Pattison story, and not just the story of the business, but the story of the people as well. And there were lots of things that I came across where my instincts were that happened or this happened. But because I just couldn't back it up 100%, like with some actual evidence, it wouldn't have made it into the book. But to me it was always a piece of narrative. It had to be, it was the Pattison story, and so it had to be told as a story. So two different reasons, one, because after seeing the photographs of Walter, and then, thanks to Leon at James Eady, who sent me a photo of Robert he'd come across whilst he was doing some work in the archives at the British Library. So looking at the photos for the first time, the actual people, not just a reference that you read in this as like a passing comment in this book, or, passing comment in that book, the actual real people. And so I just thought, to give them their dues, the whole story had to come across as the way it is. I just didn't want it to be another reference book.
No, and it's actually a remarkably quick read. I got really involved in reading in it, and I think maybe it's the era itself. I've always been fascinated by this kind of, people refer to it as, and I've seen it in other places referred to, this time, and the kind of Victorian era of whiskey is this golden era that people are talking about, it's before, the industry has been boom and bust for 300 years, as people say. And it's of an era where they're definitely, as this is happening, it's the tipping point of stuff starting to... it's clearly been eroding for a while, but it's been really well masked.
Yes.
But there's all this kind of like industry, and you've really gone to town in like the details of talking about the kind of holdings of warehouses and what liquid was moving and what Leith as a place in general, what was happening in the industry there is so interesting. And I love reading about the relationships with the various distilleries and the liquids coming down to Leith. And just, I don't know, I find it so fascinating that these people were really living a real life that here we are in 2025 discussing this, and there are repercussions that still are from these men.
I think going back to what you're saying, it is a quick read. Again, that goes back to my teacher days. I've tried to break everything down into small, manageable chunks.
Well done, BBC bite size.
Thank you. Because it is quite complicated when you look at like the financial transactions, and I have no background in finance or anything. So for me to unpick all of that, the only way that I could make sense of it was by putting it into small chunks. And I thought, well, then that's the only way that somebody's going to be able to follow the story. I'm
very glad you've done that.
So,
I think now you're technically a forensic accountant for
the
Victorian era. Yeah, definitely. The lengths at which you have gone to track down these facts and piece them back together in a way that in the modern world we can follow along and be that's where this went on that day.
I just think of sometimes. I read again. It goes back to my teaching days that sometimes it's not the learning of new things that's difficult. It's the unlearning of like things first before you can start learning new things. And everything that we've read about the Pattisons previously is kind of ingrained in Whiskey Geeks, because there's any magazine article, any sort of reference book that makes mention of them, it's the same old things that have been repeated and they're ingrained. So it's trying to unlearn all of that we've already read and found out about the Pattison before you learn the new stuff. And the only way I could do that was by breaking everything down into much smaller segments, so it's easier to follow.
I think it's great. Do you feel like you know them? If they walked in this room, you'd be like, oh, it's my mate Walter.
They did. I think looking at photos of them, that's when, rather than just sketches in newspapers, that's when you think, right, I know these people now. They're like real people. And when you read the stories of the wider family, there were so many other stories which weren't whiskey related. So the first chapter probably was going to be about 3 times as long as it was, but 2/3 of that had nothing to do with whiskey. I was like, no, you've got to get that out. Is it becoming a bit of a who do you think you are episode?
I was quite enjoying the bit of kind of like socialite and the idea of like gatherings and the people that are in the room, and like I'm always fascinated by these marrying so and so off for business, and that kind of.
So I've never written a book before. This is my first book, only book I've ever written. So to find out how to write a book, I read a book about how to write a book, and
that sounds so obvious, but I think very helpful.
Yes, and there's a couple of things that I read in that, and I tried to put them in this book. Firstly, everything that you write has to push the story along, right? Don't just write it for the sake of it, just because it's got to push the story along in some way. It's got to keep it going, whether that's sort of character development or whether that's plot development or whatever. It's got to keep the story going along. So obviously I created this sort of narrative arc and put all my plot points on there. And again, that's the sort of thing that you'd probably do if you were writing a piece of fiction, but it works just as well.
I think it's probably not a bad
for non-fiction
framework.
Yeah.
Did you have it on the wall? I'm imagining like when you watch TV and they're investigating a murder and they've got like bits of red string and everything's like like the wall becomes like a scene of mania and it's all bits of pieces that are connected somehow.
Well, I'm not a post-it note person, but I did have have like a big sheet with the narrative arc written on it, which was just always in front of me whenever I was, writing. So I kind of felt that there was no point putting something in the book, unless it was, as I say, unless it was helping the reader to move and understand everything that was going on at the time. And so, talking about things like the bal masqué and all of this, the point of that was to show their sister Laura's development as to her character and why she ended up marrying who she ended up marrying and how they met, etc. But this I read since writing the book. I read this. It's a great book. I've only started reading it. I haven't finished it yet, but it's called Drinking in Victorian and Edwardian Britain, because I don't get out much. Right?
I like that is this a guide for you to recreate this at home? So
it's a woman, I think she's definitely a doctor, but she might be a professor, I'm not sure, Thora Hands. So it's available online, just Google it. And she talks about a theory, Veblen's theory of, what was it called? Conspicuous consumption or something like that, which basically, at the time, and I think this all lends itself into the Pattison's book. So, at that time, when you think about how widely available the Scotch whisky was to the masses, so obviously 1823 onwards, it was easier for distillers to distill legally, to get their legal license to distill, and you can't expand your distilling operations really unless you're operating legally. There's a kind of limit as to how far you go. So, legal distillation and then expansion, bigger distilleries, and then continuous process of distillation meant, these blends were easier to make, cheaper, and other things like the railway network. So in the Victorian period, the railway network able to transport items to the distillery to help production, things like coal, but also being able to transport your whisky much, much further afield. And then, so Scotch whisky became something that was widely consumed amongst, the masses. So people with wealth had to find a different way to show that they were wealthy, to demonstrate their social status.
Everybody else.
And so one of the ways to do that was to spend extraordinarily large amounts of money, be really extravagant, be really flamboyant, drink the right thing, be in the right place, do the right kind of social activity, etc., etc. And that was pretty much Robert Pattison, I think.
I don't know if you've heard of this thing, Justine, called Instagram. But it is very much where if you want to show people how flashy and connected you are, now we have hashtags and you could just search that, flashy boy or whatever, I think he would have been well into the TikToks.
He would have been the worst influencer, wouldn't he?
He'd have been so annoying. He'd have been, I'm just going to go back to, you talked about the railway. I think it's I'd love to go and do some research on it. I think it's, nowadays, I guess, when you crash around Speyside in your car or whatever, because so much of that rail infrastructure is hidden away to start with because of all the hills and the way they built it, but also so much of it now is defunct. I think it's really hard in a modern context to understand what a difference the railway made in Speyside.
Absolutely.
To the point where we've built railways, so now distilleries are building deliberately where they can put sidings onto the railways, and when I do tastings and I always like to have some facts about the distillery of the liquor that you're drinking. It's incredible. Around this kind of the 1800s, end of 1800s, it's incredible the number of distilleries that were popping up in Speyside based purely on this new and exciting transport and an easy way of getting it down here to the Central Belt, which now, as a child, I loved a steam railway, but it's kind of, this slightly fuddy-duddy. It's an old thing that seems quite hard to imagine to modern minds, I guess. The idea that these great, huffing, puffing steam trains were what was bringing whiskey down to the masses instead of it being on the back of pack horses or pulled on wagons. The idea of this whiskey that's coming from quite often relatively obscure bits of Speyside ending up down here in the docks at Leith. Just because we could now roll it on bits of steel. I think it's, or iron, I guess it's mind-blowing to me to think about it. that these, the Pattisons and their other contemporaries were existing in this time where everything must have been so new and exciting. And
yes, the
they were at the forefront of being
yeah.
not only flashy guys with their fancy society balls and, appropriate business-related marriages, but this idea that we were inventing things daily to, to better the empire.
Absolutely. And, strong links with sort of marketing and empire links, because of course the empire was one of the things that helped promote Scotch whisky. So we were talking about railways, but with the railways, and let's use Leith as an example, the trains went right up to the dock. So you could actually either put your casks of whisky from the bonded warehouse straight on the train and it would go much further afield, or you could put them on a ship and it would go to all corners of the so-called empire. And so Pattison's was drunk all over the world, their particular brands of whisky, because of these sort of technological advancements with sort of transportation. So it's fascinating. Mark Davidson from Royal Mile Whiskies, I think, is the person to talk to about whisky and railways. I think he's planning something to do with.
Okay. I'll have to watch. I love watching the way he comes up with tastings anyway. But there's obviously now I'm saying this on wax, so I've just outed myself. I'd quite be up for a whisky tasting on a steam train. There is one they must do, I think, during Spirit of Speyside, because there is a refurbed bit of line. There
is, I think. Is it Dufftown Keith?
They cheat, though, because they don't just have steam trains, they have diesel locomotives.
Oh, okay.
I've already said too many train words. Let's move on quick.
Can't believe we're talking about trains.
Oh my God,
it is important. And I think so many of, it's very difficult to isolate Scotch whisky just as Scotch whisky within this particular period, because so much was happening and everything is kind of linked together. So one kind of lends itself to the success or the failure of the other. So
Can we steam towards the big crash then? So obviously where the kind of, I guess, the drama starts occurring. So this big crash that happens towards the end of the 1800s, 1898, and all the subsequent years that come with that. Did you feel like when you were looking into this, as you're reconstructing the timeline of how it was, did you feel like a sense of, I would feel like a kind of dramatic crescendo coming and like to the inevitable demise of these brothers and their, I guess, contemporaries in the industry? Because it's also worth pointing out that the Pattisons weren't the only people who ended up being investigated and convicted of various bits and pieces. It could be quite easy to, I think, pin all of this on these two and pretend that everyone else is sort of cleaning their hands in the background saying, no, nothing to do with us.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions I get asked is how... So I don't think this is going to be too much of a spoiler, but the business didn't make any money. It didn't. There was the whiskey side of the business, which was the main side of the business, although they dealt with wines and fortified wines and rum and stuff like that, other spirits. And then they had a brewery in Doddingston, and the brewery itself was successful. It was the only part of the business really that was making any money at all. The rest of the business just wasn't making any money, but for all intents and purposes, it looked as if it was hugely successful, but it was operating on credit. Is essentially what it was.
It's amazing, all these amazing buildings and frontages and just an absolute mirage.
It is, all smoke and mirrors, and so one of the questions I get asked is, how were they able to continue doing that for so long? And it's because, other members of the industry, big players and the banks, facilitated it. Yeah. They couldn't have done it without being facilitated. So the banks were discussed in the back of the book, but they would lend money to anybody who was involved in whiskey because it was thought to be liquid gold. It was thought to be amazing. So all it took was the bank to say, we're not advancing you any more money, and then the whole thing fell like a house of cards. But why were the Pattisons the scapegoats? Well, because so many companies, because of the way that the Pattisons acted fraudulently, so many other companies didn't want to be associated with that, so they distanced themselves. And in order to kind of create even greater distance, they pretty much pinned all of the focus on the Pattisons, and that's why people talk about the Pattisons. But there were many other guilty parties. They certainly weren't unique in the way that they were operating at the time. And as I say, the big players, you know, some have only got 3 letters in their name. were facilitating and did a huge amount of work to distance themselves from their involvement with the Pattisons after 1898, when it all went horribly wrong.
Just about. I also find it really interesting reading about. I guess it's quite easy to think about what it was just happening here in Leith with the blenders and people that are here, but it's not. You're also these distilleries who are at arm's length, who I guess probably in an age where communication is, letters and waiting for return mail, who maybe the news, or at least the gossip of it coming up from Leith up to Speyside, and there's some big family-owned distilleries who are involved in this, that kind of trickle-down effect. I wonder if you're up in Speyside and you hear about this, your agents down in Leith are tied up in a potential scandal.
Yeah.
If you would just dismiss that out of hand, being like, well, they come back, they're buying stock, we've got no problems, it's just, malicious gossip. We're quite happy to continue supplying them.
I think as well the way that the Pattisons kind of manoeuvred things, if we're talking about Glenfarclas, for example, so the Pattisons had a 50% stake in Glenfarclas, and they were the biggest consumers of Glenfarclas whisky. In fact, when they took over the 50% of the business, they became they had the right to buy the entire make of the entire spirit production of Glenfarclas. So any orders for Glenfarclas had to go through the Pattisons. Yeah. So in Glenfarclas, you wouldn't know because everything was going through
nice and golden.
Pattisons Limited.
Amazing.
So if a pub wanted 4 casks, or this merchant wanted X number of casks, all orders had to go through Pattisons, and then they would send the delivery orders to Glenfarclas. They would arrange for the casks to then go to the person who'd bought them, but only once Glenfarclas had received the delivery orders from the Pattisons. So it would have taken a while for them to realise, because they weren't involved in taking any of the orders.
They thought they were just doing a really successful business transaction.
Absolutely, yeah.
I find it amazing. The level of deceit, I guess, of the people involved in schemes like this. Do you think they lie awake at night? I mean, I'm also not discussing it in a way that, obviously this still happens in all sorts of industries, even now, not just whiskey. And I'm going to come to current day, because I think there's a lot to be learnt from this book. But yeah, maybe they're not actively lying awake sweating, but there must be something in their minds being like, at some point somebody's going to pull a thread and this is all going to... And they clearly knew what they were doing when you're talking about making sure that checks and sort of banking orders are only done at certain places, or only specific members of the firm were allowed to touch it, and letters were kept locked in drawers. I mean, there's a definite form of guilt happening here. They couldn't wake up one morning and be like, gasp, me? Oh, it looks like I'm the bad guy.
Yeah. Although, I mean, that was the main defence for Robert, certainly, that it was kind of an antiquated bookkeeping system and things had gone wrong. But there's
such a lame excuse. It wasn't me. My brother, he's got this really funny way of keeping books. I've never asked any questions. Like, you were really happy for the money to keep coming in, is what it was, and you didn't want to know who was paying for the fancy offices.
Aye. Although I do feel a bit sorry for Walter, because I do think from what he did, especially from... So Walter was the one who... He stood up in trial and gave his testimony, but Robert didn't. He didn't take the stand. How much of that was manipulated so that Walter came across as being, a bit daft and just sort of following his brother's every instruction because he trusted him, etc. But I do get the impression that he did really look up to his brother, but he wasn't able to show what he was capable of. He was very overshadowed by his brother in that respect.
And I guess that would have been quite common in a lot of families, especially in family business like this. Again, maybe the Victorian courts and the people hearing this would have listened with maybe more sympathy because society was structured differently. So maybe the defence of, oh, it's my brother set it all up like this, is somewhat more forgivable in an era when one brother would have held way more power.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, like, I don't think it's not a full defence. I'm not excusing him on that basis. Oh, it's my brother's books. I'm not 100% behind that as a...
Yeah, I think what I tried to... my aim for the book was to come up with an explanation for what they did, and certainly not an excuse, because even though they were the only ones who got caught, I guess, they still did wrong. So it's not an excuse, but it's more of an explanation. And because they did wrong, it was so much easier for other people in the industry to go, hey, we found someone we can pin all of this guilt on, and we won't get touched with the...
It's got nothing to do with us. Look over there. I think that's... Yeah. I also think that maybe... And again, I think in a modern world, having read this book, so much of your sentiment and so much of what ends up being discussed could still apply today.
Oh,
and
for
it
sure.
frightens me slightly that here we are in 2025. I'm not sure we've learned an awful lot from 1898.
When we look at, cask investment companies today is the obvious parallel. Casks that are being sold numerous times over. And, back in the 1890s, actually I think this article was printed maybe 1901, something like that, but it was, it's called the Distillers, Brewers and Spirit Merchants magazine, so it was a monthly publication really for the industry. And in it there's an article about cask brokering, and they put it in very clear terms that if a distillery were to sell a cask directly to a customer, then that's the value of the cask. But if a distillery were to sell a cask to a broker, who then sells it to another broker, who then sells it to another broker, who then sells it to another broker, and on each occasion they're adding their margins on, they're adding their money, and then finally they sell it to the customer. The customer's paid so much more than the cask is actually worth. And I'm like, that's 1901. It's no different today.
Good news, guys. Society's progressed far. So much of this rings true to the modern situation and the supply of whiskey, and that's a perfect example, especially about the cask investments. It's amazing reading it. Just that actually there are some scrupulous people who I think are trying to pull the same stunts. They're repeating what we have already seen.
Absolutely.
And now it's not maybe as easy to pull this off because you don't take bankers' drafts from one branch and walk them somewhere else. It's electronic and all the banks are linked to each other, and I guess you would hope that we have much more sophisticated systems for detecting fraud like that.
But something, if you put it in those sort of simplified terms, when you look at what's posted on social media and how these cask investment companies operate, it's actually not too dissimilar to what the Pattisons were doing.
No.
I mean, yes, you can track how, you can sort of track the value of the cask, but if everybody's adding on their bit as it passes along the ranks, it kind of there's not much you can do about that when you, as the customer, end up paying £40,000 for a cask that could be worth £10,000.
Tops,
yeah. So. Yeah.
Do you really feel like the industry... So I'm thinking about the industry here rather than consumers, because I think as consumers we're probably much more easily misled, I would hope, than the actual industry. I was thinking about this when I was reading the book. I mean, obviously there are distilleries who are named in here. Glenfarclas are one, but certainly not the only ones who have names, so I'm not picking on them. Do you feel like these distilleries have had to kind of pick themselves up after this and really learn from the lessons of working with people? Because there are some unavoidable things, right? If you're a distillery, and you're trying to create things, as an example, blends, you still have to work out how to build a relationship with an agent that you trust. Might be the Pattison brothers, might be the most, by-the-book dime brothers you've ever met in your life, who would not even think for 1 second about giving a drop away in a wrong way. I wonder... I think there's probably a lot of finger-pointing from other people in the industry who are, contemporaries of the Pattisons, but I wonder about these distilleries and people that were involved in the supply of liquid into this, who were doing it in such good faith. I wonder how they felt when all of this started coming out and in the newspapers, kind of thinking, oh, cripes, now we need to go and look and vet our agents. How you would do that in a time when so much of this was all built on goodwill. I trust you. I introduce you to my business partner. I trust him with my life. You should do business with him too.
Well, I think back in the 1890s, that was the way that business operated. It was it was based on goodwill. So today, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I don't know a huge amount about how cask brokers operate and how the system operates. I mean, there's it's not something I'm involved in, but I do think that who the distilleries are selling their casks to in the first place is maybe something that needs to be looked at. And
in your book that we're writing as advice to the industry, I think famously cask brokers are quite lots of bits of the industry, I think, are open, especially to the right people. But I do feel that the perception of cask brokers are probably the last bastion of very secretive handshakes behind doors. I think the industry is still quite old-fashioned. I think it is still personal relationships. So this is particularly personal and harmful because it's what our industry is built on, this idea of trust. And your whole book is about how to rob the system of trust from an industry.
Well, and there are, again, parallels because I mentioned Leith, for example. They always say Leith was built on 3 Bs. Maybe you could add the 4th B, so it's like blending, bonding, brokering, and then probably bottling later, something like that. And so when everything went wrong with the Pattisons, cask brokering just ground to a halt. There was nothing happening. So that side of the industry, that side of the trade, kind of went a little bit. Everyone was they were scared. Because so they didn't know what was going on. They knew that the Pattisons had immense stocks, so rather than continuing with sort of dealing with casks, they wanted to see what was going to appear on the market. Was it going to flood the market, and what was the price? Would they get something cheaper? Blah blah blah. So that kind of ground to a halt. And although it's not quite the same, there are sort of parallels with today because there are decent cask brokers.
Of course, we should probably put a caveat on this, and not everybody is at it and
when
terrible.
You see the sensationalist kind of, like there was the BBC documentary, and when you see the posts that appear on social media, etc. It's a shame because a bit like with the Pattison's time, everyone's getting tarred with the same brush. So. So I find it amazing that was happening in the 1890s, and despite all of this time that's elapsed, there's still nothing in place that regulates it.
Yeah.
So, that's maybe what... I don't know how you would. I haven't got a proposal for that, but I think that's what needs to happen.
I wonder if that's also part of it, that the detangling it to create a structure and a framework to put regulation in is so complicated that we've just kind of shied away from it, being like, well, the system's not entirely broken, let's just look over there.
But, I mean, it's a bit like anything, isn't it? I mean, if we go back to the days of phylloxera, when everyone says there was most books that you read, there's a shortage of, wine and brandy because of the phylloxera crisis. There wasn't really a shortage of brandy, I don't think.
Just people looking in empty cellars. Like, there used to be brandy here, not anymore.
It was made in such huge quantities. I think one of the issues was that, people didn't know what the problem was. And then when they identified the problem, they didn't know what the solution was. So they just kept stocks. They didn't want to just get rid of the stock straight away. I think the biggest problem for brandy at that point was the shitty imports that were coming in from other places rather than cognac that weren't necessarily brandy, but were much inferior quality. Mm-hmm. But they were calling themselves, sort of cognac, and so as a result of that, cognac as a whole was just considered inferior quality. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's a little bit like when something bad happens in the industry, and then folk are like, oh, it's all bad. Do you know what I mean? And everything gets tarred with the same brush. So I think
that's part of it too. It's very easy to sensationalise. One bit of bad news is obviously much more interesting than similar good news stories,
well,
I guess.
That's true, actually. I mean, I came across so many names of huge, big players in the Scotch whisky industry that we never talk about anymore. And it's because they were really nice guys. Yeah. Nobody talks about the nice guys.
Absolutely. Why do we want to remember them? They just did their jobs and went home at the end of the day. Well done, you.
Yeah, people want a bit of drama, don't they? But yeah, so I think there are definitely lessons that should have been learnt, not just from the 1890s, but then you look at the 1970s and the 1980s, and you look at today. Although the landscape for Scotch whisky is very different today than it was in those times. So.
Definitely.
But there are still lessons that perhaps should have been learnt that haven't. Hey.
Oh dear. Do you have a favourite thing that came out of this book? There is obviously the bit that I hadn't mentioned till now that everybody, I guess one of the best, most well-known urban legends about the Pattison brothers was, of course, about some pesky parrots.
Oh, those bloody parrots.
Who make a little guest appearance at the end of the book.
So, as I said at the start, I never put anything in the book that I couldn't back up. Uh-huh. Yeah? And I did come across 2 newspaper articles that mentioned the parrots and the story behind it, as I've outlined in the book. So I am one of the co-founders of the Fife Whisky Festival, and each festival we have an opening dinner and we have a guest of honour. And so whilst I was writing this book, our guest of honour was Dr. Nicholas Morgan. He wrote the great book about the Johnny Walker brand. Mm-hmm. He's obviously a great Scotch whisky historian, and he had written an article about these bloody parrots for the Whisky Exchange blog. And obviously I read it. And so I was sitting next to him at the opening dinner, and we were chatting about all things Pattisons, and you do realise I've just read your article about those parrots on the Whisky Exchange blog. All right. You do realise I've just written a chapter about those parrots. And I'm like, so basically Nick Morgan's sort of too long don't read version is those parrots could never have existed. Right? So I was like, oh, what do I do? Because it's quite a compelling argument, really, as to why they couldn't possibly have existed. And so I thought long and hard about this, and I thought, I don't think I can possibly write a book and not mention the parrots. Can't write a book about the Pattisons and not mention the parrots. And I do have 2 newspaper articles that talk about these parrots and how they acquired them, so I have got some sort of evidence to back it up. So I thought I'm going to keep it in the book, and then at the back of the book I'll just give myself a little get out of jail free card.
Absolutely. So, I think otherwise probably people would have asked you about them, I guess, because you've gone into so much fantastic detail elsewhere. For them to be absent, I think, is conspicuous.
One thing I didn't include in the book, which is often I've come across it so often in things I've read about the Pattisons, was it's the story that they brothers lived down in the Scottish borders. So Robert lived in Peebles and Walter lived in Clovenfoods. And when going back to the railways now, so looking at the old railway network that the Victorians had, I mean, it's bloody brilliant. It takes me 3 hours to get from Jedburgh to Edinburgh these days by public transport, but the railway network from the borders up to Edinburgh is absolutely fantastic. So the story was that they would get the train into Edinburgh, and they would deliberately turn up at the station late. They would have contacted journalists in advance to say, come to the station, and then they would arrive late. And because the train had left, they would then charter their own private train.
Can you imagine?
To
the
go
Uber,
to,
the Uber of the steam age.
To then go into Edinburgh. So that's the story I've read time and time again. And considering they were contacting journalists to rock up to the station, to be able to see them deliberately miss the train, you'd think there'd be some sort of newspaper article somewhere, and I just couldn't come across one. So
maybe the journalist was so irritated that by letter they had been contacted to be at this station at a certain time for these men to turn up and be like, oh no, we missed the train, how terrible, well we'll just go and charter a train. Like I cannot. So again, social media influencers before the concept had even been invented. Like, what a way to get traction, clicks, views. This is the guys, they charter trains themselves. Like, I occasionally, if I've missed a train, I'll be like, oh fine, I'll get an Uber. But the idea of chartering your own private train seems somehow far more extravagant than a private jet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it didn't happen. It's just that I couldn't find any evidence to say that that's what happened. So that's one story I've read time and time again. And people have asked, why did you put that in the book? And it's because I personally have not found anything to back that up.
I think that's very good of you to keep it honest.
Yeah.
Because all of their behaviour in this book, even if you can't find evidence of it, I absolutely believe that sounds like the kind of thing these men would have done. It just fits in with the rest of their behaviour.
Well, I mean, everything from like the financial transactions were for me the most difficult thing to understand, because don't know if you've ever read trial transcripts from 1901, but it is probably the most boring thing that you could ever read. And the Victorians had a way of, why say something that simply requires 3 words when you can write 3 pages to say the same thing.
They are so verbose. Yes, sadly, I have spent some time reading court transcripts in my olden university days of having to read various stuff, and they're the ones that they don't digitally upload, so you have to be in the library reading these tomes of many, many words. So yes, they are painful, they're interesting. I think maybe if I was reading them because I was interested in pursuing a context instead of being told, go away and read this 400-page... Yeah. No, I admire your ability to troop on through that, because it was trying. But maybe you were also, if it's locked down, you were enjoying the occasional dram just to sort of keep you going.
Well, I honestly, I'd gone to the archives, and... you are allowed to take photos of certain documents, so I actually just took photographs of every single page of the trial transcript. Wow. And then read them at home. Tried to spend the time unpicking what everyone was saying. So a couple of things that were obstacles: pounds, shillings, and pence. Like shillings and pence, it was just like okay, and I just totally took that out of the book because it totally. Detracts from any flow whatsoever. So it just removed all of that. Just sort of following and unpicking how these financial transactions occurred using, with language that some words don't even exist today, and some words have got completely different meanings today than they did back then. That was probably the trickiest part. Actually, was the whole financial unpicking.
So, I have good grounds to award you the job title forensic accountant, whether or not you want it. I want to leave the Pattisons here for now because I want people to go and read the book. The book's fantastic. I don't think we gave the full title, which is Opening the Case. Is that a deliberate pun?
Yes, but not on my part, on the Pattisons' part.
Oh, well done, boys.
When was it? I think it was 1896, I think. Or it might have been a wee bit before, I'm not sure. But they ran a competition in the newspapers, and there was a sketch by a well-known artist whose name I can't remember now, and it was a sketch of a courtroom. So it's quite ironic. I love the irony of this. It was a sketch of a courtroom, and it had 50 people in the sketch, and they were all famous, like opera singers, politicians, judges, famous names of the day. Mm-hmm. And so the competition was that you had to name all 50 people and then send in your entry to the newspaper. And And then the winners, the ones who got the most correct, won cases of Pattison's whiskey. So the sketch itself, it's got two judges in the centre, and they're holding up a bottle of Pattison's whiskey. And then at the front of the courtroom, there's a big wooden case with Pattison's whiskey, and they're all sort of staring into this case. So the sketch was actually titled Opening the Case, yeah. So you got the courtroom, the case of whiskey, etc. And I thought that's just too good not to use
Absolutely.
for the title of the book.
Okay, well, I was already impressed that there was a pun on the go, but I didn't. Yeah, okay, well, that's excellent. So the book is called Opening the Case: The Affairs of the Pattison's Whiskey. I will put links for where people can buy it, and you just released it as it's a hardback and a softback book.
Yeah, paperback. Yeah, just a few days ago. Yeah,
excellent. So I'll put those in the links, and Joshua will work some magic so people can find you.
Cool.
But I'm not letting you escape. I have a few other things to touch on before we escape, because you are a woman of many talents, and because you're here trapped in this room with me and you can't. Well, I mean, you could leave, but it'd look weird. I want to ask you about other things that you do. Obviously, we touched on the Leith tours, and I heartily endorse them if you ever take them up again. I really enjoyed walking around Leith with you.
Yeah.
And surreptitiously having an occasional dram that came out of your backpack. That got us some funny looks in Leith.
Well,
we also made Mariella go to the British Heart Foundation shop and pick the most ridiculous whiskey glass she could have chosen. It was a very fancy little schnapps glass that she then produced at various stages. I thought that was great. But you are also, you have mentioned, co-founder of Fife Whisky Festival and the Borderlands.
Yes.
Because one whisky festival is not enough work.
Well,
you decided two seemed more fun.
So, I mean, Fife we've done... So I run the festival with Karen Somerville, who some of your listeners will know, who she had Angel Share Glass. She had the company Angel Share Glass for a good 10 years, I think. And so we set that up. I think our first festival in Fife was 2018, yes. And then last year we decided we would try another festival of the same format in Lockerbie, in Dumfries and Galloway, and that was the Borderlands Whisky Festival. Since we started Fife, be perfectly honest, 2018, it seems surprising now because tickets for Fife went on sale at the beginning of September, and they sold out in 9 minutes, which was our record to date.
I think that's ridiculous.
Very
well done.
We're not a huge festival. It's not like, we're not selling thousands of tickets, but it's still it's probably about, over the course of the weekend, it's still like 1,000 tickets over 3 days.
Absolutely, you're not 10 people in a room. It's a serious, heavy enterprise.
But 2018 was a hard slog, and we really struggled to sell tickets because we were a new festival, and we put it down to the fact that there were so many whisky festivals, like on the circuit. I mean, like every weekend you could have gone to a whisky festival somewhere in the UK. Fast forward to last year, and there were even more. So it was tricky trying to get people to come to Lockerbie, even though it's probably easier to get to from Edinburgh and Glasgow than Cooper is, which is where the Fife Whisky Festival takes place. But sort of reality versus perception and all of this. So we really needed to take a look and say, well, how are we going to work on this? How are we going to make this as successful as we are with Fife? And it's a different, as I say, it's a different landscape now on the Whisky Festival front. Because Karen and I have got lots of different projects going on, we said we won't do Borderlands this year, so we'll revisit it in the new year and we'll see what 2026 brings. But March 2026, we have the Fife Whisky Festival, so sold out. So that's good.
We can't even help by saying get your tickets here. That's just a classic. Here's what you've missed.
Well, we could actually because so we've changed the format for the Sunday for next year, only just because Karen and I are getting a wee bit old, to be honest. So, we're knackered on the Saturday evening. So we have the opening dinner on the Friday, then we have all day Saturday. And then we would have a couple of events on the Sunday always, because there's just two of us. I think sometimes people don't realise it's actually just the two of us that run this festival.
Of work you do.
We have amazing volunteers and amazing exhibitors and sponsors. We have amazing people, but it's just us that run it, basically. Tell people, do this, do that, whatever. And we have just lots of other commitments this year. So so we thought, well, there were lots of distilleries and bottlers that kind of want to do a Sunday event, but we've always only been able to limit it to 2. One that I go to, one that Karen goes to. So this time we said, do you know what? You organise it, and we can have as many events as you want. So we have a lot more events on the Sunday now, and I think we've got 5 or 6 events, and I think 3 or 4 have sold out. But there's still, I think there's a blending workshop with Isabella Weems at King's Bars, which is just going to be like fantastic, you know. So I think there's still tickets for that. Aber Argy, which isn't in Fife, but it's just a hop, skip and a jump over the border in Perthshire.
It's outside of the kingdom, it doesn't count.
No, it does. We love them. They opened their doors to the distillery for the first time a couple of years ago, and they're doing the same again. So that would be the first opportunity for somebody to try their inaugural single malt, is that tour. And then our good friends Lady of the Glen in Dalgety Bay, they've got 2 warehouse tastings. So they did a warehouse tasting this year, but to accommodate, like size-wise with people, they had a marquee out the front, a bit Baltic that time of year, it's end of Feb.
Yeah, a bit chilly.
Yeah, so this time they're going inside the warehouse without a marquee blowing in the wind, drawing whiskey, you know, a warehouse tasting straight from the cask into your glass. And I think there's just a few tickets left for those. So, yeah, if people haven't got tickets for the festival, any of those events are worth going to.
All right, okay, that sounds good. Mm-hmm. My final bit that I'm going to pick at you. So I was really enjoying your investigative journalism, I'm going to call it, where you were popping up in various graveyards as part of your research. I was really enjoying those. Currently, you've upgraded yourself to what I think is my favourite thing to watch on Instagram, which is you pouring 25 mils of whiskey into increasingly ridiculous, absurd situations. Or not. Sometimes you're very generous with those pours. If nobody knows what I'm talking about, you need to go and find Justine's Instagram, where she sets up a challenge for herself to pour a 25 measure freehand into usually something ridiculous. Yeah. And it's just the setup. I really enjoy the concept. Where does that come from?
Well, I can't at the moment drink as much as I'd like. Yeah. So I'll just say, I've told everyone and their granny, I've got these daft gallstones, huge, massive, feck-off gallstones. It's just affected the diet. I mean, on the plus side, I've lost about 10 kilos, which is, something I've never been able to do in my life. But it just means I have to limit how much I can drink, because it can be quite painful. So if you run social media and it's all about whiskey, it kind of gets a bit problematic if you can't actually write tasting notes. And the one thing I can't bear is the one thing I really can't bear is when somebody posts a bottle of whiskey and it's clearly not opened. It's still there, cork capsule, a lot, with a glass next to it full of whiskey. And I just can't be that person who's just posting non-stop pictures of unopened bottles. So
usually with your watch on the neck or in a sports car, or there's some sort of naked woman in the background.
Well, maybe I should do that, unopened bottles with my ex-Royal Mail van,
I think there's a niche.
Yeah, so I can't, I'm a little Swatch watch or something. Or my Casio, I don't know.
Yeah, Casio watch.
Yeah, okay. So I was like, oh Christ, I've got to come up with content. I mean, it's the way it is. If you
Sadly, that's the world.
I mean, if I didn't run a business, if I wasn't, if I wasn't writing books and trying to promote things, I probably would come off social media, or probably wouldn't go on it anywhere near as often as I do, I'll be honest. But so coming up, trying to think of content, I was like, oh, what can I do? And I saw this guy, it's called something like Going Halves. It just came up on my social media feed. So he basically has something really daft, I don't know, he'll have a bagel, and he'll say, can I cut this bagel exactly in half and he'll come up with some kind of a machete or some sort of samurai sword or something really ridiculous, and And you watch it and you go, why the hell have I just watched that?
Do you know this is a German sport? This is a German sport that
Is
they
it?
show on TV where it'll be like, can you cut this pretzel in half perfectly?
Okay,
and
yeah.
honestly, the first time I watched it, I was like, I can't believe I'm watching this. You know, go outside and touch the grass or something. It's addictive.
It is.
It's very addictive. Like, can this man slice something perfectly in half? Can you? Yeah, I want them to somehow annex this into an Olympic sport because I would be so into it.
So I was just thinking, that could be fun. It's people talk about free pour and stuff like that, and I was like, I wonder if I can pour exactly 25 mil. I live in the Scottish borders. I live in a tiny town. It's called Jedburgh. People call it Deadburgh because nothing happens. Yeah, I don't get out much. And I was just like, I wonder if I can pour exactly 25 mils into this glass. So I thought I'll just try it, and I just filmed it, and then I thought, oh, glass is a bit boring, isn't it? Let's see what else I can put 25 mils in.
Honestly, it's compulsive viewing. Sometimes I'm watching you point, but like, nah, she's overshot this. And like when you watch something like curling, a sport I have absolutely no qualifications or skills in, you're like, they've gone way over the target there. There are sometimes I've watched, I've been like, it's going to be on the line.
What's super interesting is, like a glass, we've all poured like in a Glencairn glass. Like we kind of know what 25 mils looks like in a Glencairn glass, so you probably get quite close when you do it. I think COVID has a lot to answer for because, you know, house measures were like...
House measures are pints.
Exactly. I wrote something yesterday about a peg of whiskey, and I was like, what is a peg of whiskey? And a peg of whiskey, I think, is about 60 mils. So I think during COVID, everyone was on a good peg of whiskey each time. So I think that kind of like maybe threw us a bit, you know, prior to COVID. We kind of had an idea of what 25 mils looked like, and then house measures, like that just totally threw us. But when you're trying to pour 25 mils into something that isn't a glass, something that you're not familiar with, it's amazing. You just don't. You think you know the number of glugs you think you do, but you don't.
I think this could have been never mind your parrots. I think this could be the new way of advertising yourself, like watch us pour proficient amounts of whiskey.
And then people suggest what could be the next vessel I could try and pour things. So people have said, try a frying pan, try a milk carton. But today's, so I don't know when this will go out, but I struggled to find something suitable for today's. But I think I managed it. It's pretty crap.
No, I was, the first time I started watching this, I did try to start in my head mentally compiling a list of things that you could add to your challenge. I don't know how long your challenge list is, but I was like, I was trying to think of, maybe I'll submit these when we've turned the mics off. You have, of course, apart from brilliant marketing stunts, such as putting 25 mils into various artefacts, your writing appears in all sorts of places, famously places like the Malt Whisky Yearbook, which is a must-read for me. So that's really exciting to see your name pop up there and in all sorts of other places. Yes. How do people find your other writings? And then I have I'm going to call it famous. I've only done it once before, but we're going to call it my famous quick 5 questions. Okay. Actually, maybe we'll do this first, and then I'll tell people how to find you as the final sale. Okay. So Jason, regular podcast listeners will know, always has a let's get out of here question. Okay. Which makes me panic because it reminds me of the question you get at the end of a job interview where they say, and do you have any questions? At which point you realise you've never thought of a question in your life.
And you've got to come up with something clever.
And you have to come up with something that sounds intelligent whilst it's like, are you going to pay me? Or do I get a chair with my desk? So I thought, quick fire 5.
Do you know, I've not had a job interview for like, I don't know how long. So that's great. I like it.
You could write this down. Should you ever need it? Not that I hope you do. I figured by the time we had talked for a little bit, if I put this at the beginning, would have the same jarring effect. So at the end, we've discussed all sorts of things. So my interviews, I'm going to start doing these same 5 questions, adapting them slightly. So you are victim number 2. Okay. First question. I don't want you to think really hard about this. Right. This is just your gut reaction.
First that comes into my head.
First, if you were a whiskey, what would you be?
Springbank.
Springbank. Anything in particular, Springbank?
A young Springbank.
Good. Okay. A young Springbank.
A young sherry cask Springbank.
That's a solid answer, though.
Okay.
To say that I've just thrown it at you. What's your desert island dram? This can be a dram from all of time. Doesn't have to be things that we have in modern time right now?
Oh, right, okay. I'd have to say the Pattisons.
That's what I would thought maybe you would, pick something of their...
I'd actually go for the Glenlivet vat. And if you read the book, you'll see why, because it had nothing to do with Glenlivet.
I was looking at your recipe for that, and I have it in my mind to go look and see if I could find someone recreating it.
See if it was as bad as it sounds.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Number 3? What do you think is the most underrated region or distillery in the whiskey industry?
I would have said Glencadam. But I think now that's moving up the ranks.
Because they've got a visitor centre. Have you just decided they've...
Well, no, I think they've a lot more promotion. The brand ambassador's gone out. There's a lot more, they're a lot more visible, let's put it away. It was always one of those drams that sort of fell under the radar, I think. Last weekend I was at Royal Brackla and I tasted the whiskies and I thought, do you know what? I think I've tasted that yonks ago and have not tasted any of these. It's totally gone under my radar. Maybe it harks back to the sort of days when they were just used as components for blends and they were never marketed and then continued to be used as components of blends. But do you know what? I loved the Royal Brackla. I just thought it was great. I was just like, why have I not... So yeah, Royal Brackla I think has gone totally under my radar.
I think you might be with Roddy at Good Spirits. I think he's of the... I don't know what the collective... Jason's a big fan of Balmenic, and we started referring to him as the cult leader of the Balmenic bunch. I'm sure Roddy is into Royal Brackla, so you're not the first person maybe to mention that. I could also be misquoting him, which is very unfair. So, okay, great. Underrated, we'll take Royal Brackla. Question number 4. If you were starting whiskey today in 2025, where do you think you would start? Do you think you would aim for... well, you've already said Springbank as your whiskey, but do you think you would...
Do you mean like flavour profile?
Yeah.
Or do you mean like...
What do you think would be your first dram if you were starting over completely?
Oh, I would make something... If I were creating a whiskey, I would try and make something that was very similar to the Glenord of old. You remember the 10 years? It was one of the first single
like
malts
the square
in the cube-shaped bottle. Yeah. It's nothing like the Glenord you get now. It's like they would argue it is, but I would. I don't remember it tasting like that, you know. So I just remember it was slightly. It felt slightly peated, but not peated. You know what I mean? Slightly smoky, but just unbelievably beautifully well balanced, and no major sort of cask influence, like heavily sherried and stuff like that. Yeah. No sherry bombs. After saying I'd like a sherried Springbank, but it can hold on. But it was I just remember that was the first whiskey that I tried that I thought, oh, this is just absolutely beautiful. This is great. So I'd like to make something like that. Okay. And try and remember that.
Oh, that's good. I'm sure there used to be an old bottle of Glenord in Lismore pub in Glasgow, and I think that and one of the old Tamdoos, or like the Dumpy.
Oh yeah.
I think we drank quite a lot of that. I think we might have been involved in its demise. Okay, that's good. I like that answer. Okay. Final of my quickfire 5. Is there something that you would regard as a most missed dram?
A most missed.
Yeah, is there
like
a dram that you used to be able to get and you can't? This was easier when I was talking to Matthew, because a most missed dram in a shop has a different Good Spirits. What do they miss having in? But is there a dram that you used to be able to find everywhere? But maybe we already answered that with the Glenord.
Maybe with the Glenord. I was just thinking maybe I've already answered that question. I
have to revise my quickfire 5. Shit.
No, maybe I've got one answer that kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Yeah, I would say. Because I've tried Glenord, like I've tried indie bottlings, and there's a lot of cask finishing and stuff like that. And then I've been to the distillery and I've had the distillery exclusives and everything, but it just doesn't taste, as I said, doesn't taste like the Glenord. I remember the Glenord, I think it was the 10 in that cube bottle, so that might be one of the most missed drams. And it's difficult, isn't it? Because we are so spoiled for choice, I think that's one of the things that I often say is like, back in the day, everyone was particularly loyal to a brand, they'd buy something, finish the bottle, buy the same bottle and finish it, just loyal to brands. And today we're just like ridiculously promiscuous and we're like, oh, that's a good deal, that one. And we're so spoiled for choice that sometimes to think, we get to the point where we want to drink single cask strength this and to think of a 46% or even a 40% whiskey, everyone's like, oh, are you sure? But sometimes it's just that familiarity, it's that nice sense of familiarity that you get when you have that go-to dram, and so I think Glenord 10, the old style Glenord 10 would probably tick that box for me.
I like that answer. So that's my fast 5 taken care of. Now I think we should promote you properly. I already said I'm going to put the book and a link to your website in our various pluggables pages. Is there anywhere else you would like people to find you apart from obviously a graveyard whilst you're doing a camera piece?
That's it. Yes, I haven't done too many graveyard videos lately. I need to get back on it. But one of the things, I mean, my website is pretty much just about the book at the moment. There's not really much else on there. So if people find me on Substack, that's where all my bletherings can be found on Substack. So,
okay. And they should sign up to your excellent weekly email, which I always enjoyed.
Yes, yeah.
A little canter through of other bits of snippets you found in
Yes, I do feel a bit like, sort of Ronnie Corbett in his armchair. It does go off on lots of tangents, and then I go, right, what's the point of this? But it's again, if you're really into the history of Scotch whisky, there's lots of really geeky information in the emails, and I write it for myself really, and then just send it out to everyone else.
They're quite often my lunchtime read. I enjoy a little nosy through. And people can find your excellent pouring skills on Instagram. You are Cask Whisky with a K.
Yep,
Cask Whisky.
Nothing hipster there actually. Just that the one with the C was already taken. Like the domain name was taken, the handles were taken, so I just ended up putting a K in instead.
No, I like it. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking about the book. Mm-hmm. I hope that everybody gets a chance to go and read this. It's fascinating, and then go away and think about what we have not learnt from mainly Justine's fantastic research into the Pattisons and their other work-laced friends who were committing very much the same crimes.
Indeed.
Thank you very much for your time.
No, thanks for having me. It's great. Cheers.
That was an awesome conversation, Jess. Thanks so much for meeting with Justine, taking the time, hearing about all she does. I mean, you mentioned it at the outset of the podcast, like I introduced her as an author, but it's clear she does so many other things. And there are many arrows in her quiver. What did you say? What was your term? There are many strings to her bow?
Strings to her bow.
All right.
Is that...
Okay, arrows to her quiver.
I feel like there's all sort of like weirdly medieval Renaissance references. Have we not come up with a better way of saying someone's multi-talented in a kind of metaphorical way since we stopped using bow and arrow?
No, I think once you get past the Renaissance, I don't think you can use any more metaphors. I think they're all Renaissance-related metaphors.
Okay. Well, I have no reason to research that and raise any contention, so I'm just going to say yes.
But, you mentioned before about taking this idea of the Pattison crash of 1898. Geez, here we are 128 years later, and we're still not really learning lessons. But anyway, of taking this this information that can be really dry, but she delivers it in a very enjoyable, accessible manner, which is really difficult to do. And I was trying to compare it to, or the parallel that I had in my head was that movie, The Big Short. Do you remember that movie?
Oh, so I've seen the trailer. Me famously, who's never seen any movie
that's right.
ever.
You don't watch
I do know
movies.
what you're talking about, though.
Yeah,
weirdly, I only watched movies that were made decades before I was born, and then after that, no movies at all.
So the movie was it was basically right. It was about the housing crash in the earlier 2000s, and it was explaining all of the ins and outs of that crash, which was incredibly boring subject. Very not boring, but difficult to penetrate for the average person. But they made it so incredibly digestible. And that's not an easy thing to do. So the fact that she's able to do this, I mean, kudos to her for that. Unlike Jason, I have not yet read this book, but it's on my list. It's actually my next book to read. I'm currently in the middle of another book, but it is my next book to read. So after
I'm sure
listening
she'll
to
be
this
delighted
combo,
to hear that.
yeah. So I am very excited.
I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Yeah, you're right. There's not many kind of meet cutes. I do seriously think she could option her book to Netflix. We could make this into a whole, I think it's got glamour, there's villains. I think there's going to be amazing outfits, given it the period that it's in and the buildings that it was all part of, especially in Leith. I think it's got potential. And I hope she cashes in first on it. So if there's any kind of commissioning people listening to our podcast, obviously there's loads of them. You should definitely hit us up. I'll connect you with Justine, and we can make some entertaining TV. Definitely out of it. There's at least one season, I think, to be made out of it.
For sure. I see royalties in your future, Jess.
Oh, and then obviously we can advise on the liquid. There could be a tie-in somehow, like a kind of flash forward to a single cast nation. I've got it sort of half botched together. I'll have a dram and come up with a better solution to it all.
I love this. So while we were talking, while we were listening to this podcast, some emails had come in. Yep. One of them was from a Nigerian prince.
Oh. Did he get the money, the Bitcoin that I sent him?
He did, but he needs your national insurance number.
Oh,
do you happen to have that?
Sure, I'll just read it out slowly. It's 612. I'll put it on a post-it note and send it to him. That's great, admin. Thanks so much for helping me on that. Were there any other princes in our inbox that we need to talk to?
There wasn't any other princes, but there was an ice cream man in our inbox.
Oh. I'd say that's my second favorite kind of email to receive after offers of making me a billionaire in Bitcoin.
Yeah. We received an email from Christopher Hagenhagen, aka the Ice Cream Man, and it came in. It actually didn't come in while we were recording here. It came in just after the New Year on January 2nd, and it was addressed to all three of us.
Lovely.
And I'm going to read it to you, to everybody. It says, "Dear JJ and Jay, Happy New Year. Just sending a quick note to rave about your recent Lafroig 25 release. I had received it before my holiday travels and had done a quick neck pour tasting by myself."
Oh no, not the neck pours.
The dangerous neck pour. Shit, and see, now I'm nervous.
I'm nervous. Neck pours make me nervous.
Yeah. All right, I'll go on. I thought it was pretty fantastic, but wanted to revisit it before sending this note. Okay, so we're off to a good start.
I appreciate his thoroughness. I feel much calmer now. I don't know about you, but I'm relieved. I'm excited for the rest of the email.
I was waiting to exhale. I exhaled. So. Last night, I had the chance to pour it for a couple of friends. The three of us traveled to Isla and Campbelltown in the spring of 2025 and got to experience a great many older Lafroigs, but this one may be our favorite yet. Right? Words like sublime, profound, and powerful came to mind, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. We're not sure how you found a 25-year-old Lafroig at 58.3% ABV, but the higher ABV really sets it apart from the OB 25-year-olds. After tasting it for a bit, I looked up your official tasting notes and read them aloud to the group. My friend just about jumped out of his chair when I read the spent shotgun shells note. He had just been pheasant hunting in the fall, and this one really resonated with him. "Yes, that's it!" he shouted. I should be a narrator. I think I should be a narrator.
I was enjoying your reenactment there. I have further questions about you guys having ever been shooting pheasants for finding these tasting notes, but carry on.
Well, I've never hunted, but I used to shoot with my dad. Anyway.
What were you shooting then? Are you allowed to say
clay
it on
pigeons?
wax?
Yeah. Clay pigeons and just target practice. My dad had shotguns and rifles. He used to build guns too, old Civil War era guns and things like that. Yeah. And
I just get confused sometimes when you guys use tasting notes for things. I can't imagine either of you taking part in like smoky bacon. You know, it's shotguns.
I used to. But anyway.
Sorry, yes, please carry on.
Yeah, continue.
I'm glad that they are really enjoying our tasting notes. That's great.
Yeah. So he continues. There were a couple additional notes that we found and thought were fun. There's some sort of exotic tropical fruit note on the nose, but we weren't completely able to place it. Also, we followed your 25 with a signatory 1991 15-year expression that was bottled in 2007. A super fun auction win that my friend brought over. When we came back to your 25-year-old, it was like we were back on Isla walking through the distillery. Faint fermentary wash notes had crept into the nose that we missed on the first pass. Anyway, an awesome expression. I'm really glad I snagged this one. Chris, the ice cream man, Hagen, Chicago, Illinois.
Oh, that's a lovely email.
Isn't that lovely?
Thanks, ice cream man. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. The fruity thing in old Isla whiskies is something I'm very interested in because it comes across in lots of other distillates. Obviously, I would love to be able to expense several rounds of expensive old Isla whiskies purely for research.
Purely.
So, I mean, Jason's not here to stop us. You and I could do that, right? We could just...
Of course.
I wonder... I'm sure there are some sciencey based people listening that will understand where it comes from because I definitely get it. That kind of tropical fruit thing, especially in old Bowmores, is definitely there. There's a kind of interesting juxtaposition, I think, between the peat kind of dialing back a little bit and then some of that lovely old fruity notes coming out.
Mm-hmm. With Bowmore, I find that quite often. Like, I think that just seems to be true to their spirit for the most part. There's certain eras, and this is something that Ollie Chilton is talked about quite often. I forget what era he mentions, but there's a certain era that's more minerally than other eras, but they tend to be quite tropical. With the Laphroaig, I remember Jason and I doing a class with Dennis. Geez, we mentioned it in a previous episode, but it was a previous distillery manager, and he was talking about sort of the evolution of Laphroaig's processes, where they went from a brewer's yeast to a combination of brewer's yeast and distiller's yeast, and then to just distiller's yeast. And then they started speeding up production as demand for their liquid had increased, and in the speeding up of production, you lose that fruitier quality, right? And so I think there's a number of factors at play. Why those are what they are, that part I can't say, but I think that's where those fruitier notes seem to lie. It was with the slower production, and with some of those, the brewer's yeast, or that combination of brewer's yeast and distiller's yeast. And the other thing that we found too was the Laphroaig floor malted barley and the Bowmore floor malted barley seemed to be fruitier. Did you try the 8-year-old Bowmore Fagile bottling?
Yeah,
from a couple years back?
I've really enjoyed every year. Definitely since you guys came over, every year they have released another, like, as it's getting age on it, of the floor malting Bowmores.
Oh, shit.
So that's quite often, like, one of the classes that David will do. That you can only get the bottle if you've done the thing. The class.
Can you only get one bottle?
Yeah. Which is nice, because otherwise I'd have to be wearing, like, several different hats and disguises and giving myself fake names, much like a scammer. To be queuing up for all the people I'd love to share this with. Eventually, I want to put all of these bottles together and do a tasting of all of them as like a vert of all the Bowmore floor maltings as they progress through age. Eventually, once we get a few of them together. But yeah, they're amazing, and they are so tropical and fruity. They're absolutely delicious. And I think if I was only told about them, as the listeners of this podcast are, I'm not sure I would fully trust it, because there's obviously a bias, right? You know, you were on Isla, you've heard the stories about the floor maltings and the kind of project David Turner's put in place to create this. Maybe you're buying into how much fruitier they are. But when I've dipped in and out of them, or if I've been back at the distillery and they have the bottles open, it's a noticeable difference. So I can well believe the same exists at other distilleries like Laphroaig, who are obviously sisters to Bowmore. So there's some of the processes shared there. So
that's a very good
I can
point,
believe that there's a notable difference between the two. I just love really old Islay whiskey is my problem. And I can't often afford to buy the really lovely old dusty bottles. So I have to be lucky and be in a bar and feel a bit generous with my credit card, or your credit card, or anybody else's credit card who I have taken with me to the pub. I'd be caught so easily. It's such a niche crime I'm committing, going to high-end whiskey bars, drinking on other people's credit whiskeys. Doesn't bode well for my future.
That really is the bad thing about old Islay whiskey is it's just so fucking good.
Yeah.
Or
I guess the same thing can be said about things like Brora, also always delicious and too expensive.
Not always delicious.
No? Oh.
No. I found some... I've had a number of older Broras that have that sour milk note that you sometimes get on some of the off Bruichladdich, which can...
All of them.
All right. Controversial.
I've always been upfront about it. That's the distillery that I find it in the most.
Oh, so you were just teeing me up so you can get your dig at Brora here. All right. You're telling your truth.
I think not that I've had lots of either of them. We're not in the end of year podcast, so I'm not here to boast. Of all the Broras and all the Port Ellens, which I can probably nearly count on both of my hands, I've had more disappointing experiences with Port Ellen than I have had with Brora.
Oh,
now,
interesting.
I am very open to disclosing a PO address that you could send me samples of your brilliant versions of both of these whiskies, and I will sample them out for you.
Look at that.
I'm not... I also think, there's a bit of my brain that doesn't want to believe in the hype, right? I really don't want to get caught up in the idea that these, closed and mothballed and taken down distilleries are the pinnacle of whiskey and cannot be improved on. Because... I have repeatedly demonstrated that I think young world whiskies can and are brilliant. There's some amazing stuff happening here in Scotland. It doesn't have to all be closed distilleries. So, not really very sure how to back myself out of this hole of apparently slagging off Brora and or Port Ellen. But I think
You've done it now, Jess.
I've done it now. Shit. Just scrub that bit. I think... having a bottle that takes you, especially if you're sharing it with people who've been to the same places. So I guess for a lot of people who are not lucky enough to be in Scotland, having come to Scotland and done a trip, being able to be back home in Chicago, like the Ice Cream Man, and drinking something that immediately whips you back to being somewhere else is to me one of the greatest joys of whiskey, and a privilege to share it with people that I've been to these places with, or even people who I haven't been, and I want to say, hey, you should come to Islay or come to Scotland. This is the kind of thing that you could maybe have.
Yep. It's a special, special thing.
It's delicious.
Yeah. Well, huge thanks to Justine, to your good self, for snagging her and for the podcast and carrying on a really wonderful conversation. Thanks to the Ice Cream Man for sending in his conversation, to the Nigerian Prince for sending over his email as well. If you want to email us, you could do so, info@singlecastnation.com. And let me see what else. Hey, while this episode may not be on YouTube from a visual perspective, more and more of our episodes are appearing on YouTube. And if you want to see our faces, please come there and please subscribe. Please tell your friends. The more friends you have listening, the more you get to talk about how fun these episodes are. so bring a friend, have them subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our podcast, and I guess that's it. I just want to thank everybody for listening, and thank you, Jess, for hanging out and chitty chatting.
It's great to see you. That's a strong start to the year. Hopefully, we don't end up in jail. So, if we don't, listeners, come back and we'll tell you some more things. Not necessarily financially related. We can definitely share we should also share, as well as in the links to the things where you can come and find Justine's book.
Ah, good. Yeah, that's excellent. So we'll put that in the show notes of the podcast, and I will also make that available in our Facebook page as well. Normally we have links to just the episodes, but we'll pop the link to her book as well.
Cool.
All right.
Till next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.